Welcome, everyone. I'm Elaine Pofeldt. I am a journalist who spent years studying independent businesses, and I'm your moderator for our panel on structuring client relationships that flourish. This is a topic that is critical for every solo professional. We all need clients to build our businesses, and yet this is one of the most troublesome and complex areas of growing a business that I can think of. We have a smoking hot panel today. We've already talked behind the scenes, and these are some of the leading experts in this area that I know of, and I've interviewed quite a few. So I wanted to introduce you to our panelists, and thank you for coming. It's so great to come together in community. Today we have Brett Trainer, who has been recognized by Fortune as a top career coach, and he hosts the Corporate Escapee podcast, which is in the top 3% globally, besides having an incredible title that I find very addictive. I love the word escapee, and has built a following of over 67,000 followers on TikTok for sharing insights on fractional work and career freedom. Welcome, Brett. We have Taylor Crane, who founded Fractional Jobs, the leading marketplace connecting fractional leaders with startups, after successfully exiting his own venture, Clubs Poker, in 2023. I love Taylor's newsletter. Maybe some of you get it in your email inbox with the latest fractional jobs. He's a real thought leader in this area of doing high-level professional work without having to be part of the daily grind of a corporate job. And we have Pia Silva, who many of you know. She's kind of famous. She is the founder of the new BS Agency Mastery, a TEDx speaker and an author who's mastered the art of helping small agencies scale to $30,000 a month without employees. And wouldn't many people want that? So welcome, everyone. I just wanted to tell you we have the Q&A where you can submit questions. They're going to bring up a lot of interesting topics. And if I see anything that's tied into what they are saying, I'm going to stop for a moment and address them. So please keep the questions coming. This should be a really action-packed panel. It's not just about landing clients. It's about building structures that maximize revenue and create sustainable, meaningful relationships that fuel your business growth. We're going to explore the nuanced art of structuring engagements that work for both you and your clients. And all three of these professionals are experts in this area. They'll help you build the structures you need to scale your revenues for success. I'd like each of you to start sharing your unique approach to client relationships and how you've evolved your model to create more value and sustainability. So let's take a look at some critical challenges. Taylor, you work with fractional leaders across various industries. Can you walk us through the unique opportunities fractional roles offer professionals? What are the advantages for both the independent professional and the client in choosing a fractional engagement over traditional full-time or project-based work? And if you could define fractional, there might be some people here who this is new to.
Sure thing. There's so many questions there. Why don't I start with what is fractional work? We'll start there and then we'll expand. So very simply, fractional work means part-time work performed by experts in their field and typically done on a monthly retainer. So we're basically talking about like folks that are mid-career and late career as well, that are working with early stage startups, small businesses in a part-time capacity. And then Elaine, happy to go into, so what do you want to go to, like the unique way to approach the relationship, or talk through some of the advantages of doing fractional work? What do you think is the right next question to answer?
Well, let's get down to some of the basics in terms of what kind of work can even be done fractionally, because I find this fascinating. People think fractional CFO usually when you say this, and what I found in my research, I wrote a book called The $1 Million One Person Business, and every year I look up the data. There are about 53,000 $1 million one person businesses, and about 13,000 are in professional services, and a lot of them are fractional executives. What other types of work besides a CFO can be done fractionally?
Yeah, so with respect to fractional jobs specifically, like we are helping startups hire fractional leaders across about 10 different function areas. Our most popular are going to be fractional CFOs, fractional CMOs, and fractional CTOs probably. And those are, I think, the most obvious and the most approachable and easily understandable by founders and hirers. It's very like, when you're a founder, let's say, right, and you're thinking like, I have a need for strategic finance help. You're oftentimes not going to think to yourself, I can do it on my own, or I can have someone on my team do it for me. You're thinking, I need to go externally. And so that's where hiring a fractional CFO becomes a pretty obvious, or one potential obvious next step. But we're working on all kinds of roles that are maybe a little less obvious. So like fractional heads of product, which is my own background as well, fractional principal designers, compliance officers, chief information security officers. I'm definitely a believer that any function area can be fractionalized, because at the end of the day, hirers are approaching fractional work because they have a need for senior level expertise, but they don't have the budget or the need for it to be a full-time hire. And I think that really applies across the board. But of course, especially right now, as we're early in the fractional world, I think there are more obvious or more common roles than others. Fractional CFOs and fractional CMOs, probably, and then CTOs as well, probably being the three most common.
This is so great to hear, because what I'm hearing, the subtext is many professional careers can be turned into fractional roles, and a lot is dictated by the limits of your own creativity. And so, you know what, let's jump around a little bit. Pia, you're an advocate for intensive high profit package services with short time frames. Can you talk a little bit about why you've avoided retainer and fractional models? What is unique about your approach? And I realize you're not in conflict with Taylor about his approach. It's just more of a way that the services are sold, but this is really useful information for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tend to work with more creative people. I hear from Taylor, like you're talking about people who have been in corporate for a long time and they're offering services in an ongoing way. I owned a branding agency where we also delivered services in a retainer model, project-based services that took months to deliver. But I didn't go into business to constantly be working for a lot of clients at once. I purposefully wanted to have my own business so I could have time freedom and financial freedom. And what I found, at least in the creative space, was that ongoing clients and ongoing work tended to be very difficult to keep profitable, because when you had a number of clients that you were working with on an ongoing basis, it's kind of like always fires to put out. There's always client management to do. Projects tended to take longer and longer because creative work can be susceptible to scope creep. Any creatives on the line know what I'm talking about. So what happened was, our business, even though revenue-wise we were arguably successful at the time, about 3 years into our business, we generated about $250,000 in revenue. We were wildly unprofitable and very overworked. So we actually were forced to make a change, and the change we made was into this intensives model. So I advocate for short projects that happen on a much shorter timeline. What I've found is that with these creative projects, you can actually do a project that would have before taken me 3, 6, 12 months to do in actually a few days working with the client, if you only work with one client at a time, and you do obviously a bunch of other things in your process that build trust, credibility, and essentially you own your systems and your processes and make them so tight, you're actually able to deliver the same or more value, but in a concentrated amount of time. I prefer that, and a lot of people that I work with prefer that, because we don't want to expand and have large teams. That's what this summit is all about. But also it allows us to concentrate fully on one client project at a time, deliver at our highest level, and then be finished with it, and then maybe start the next project 3 weeks later. And in that in-between time, we have time to build our business, live our lives, travel, enjoy. So that's the basic model, as quickly as I can explain it.
You're blowing my mind, because I mean, there's many layers to this, but one is you're taking a lot of control of the process instead of letting whatever the client's meeting rhythms are dictate when it gets done. You're maximizing focus so that people aren't distracted by juggling 19 projects at once, which we've all done at some point in our careers. And you're also making the client happy by delivering a result quickly, so they're not questioning, are they still working on this, or are we getting our money's worth out of this, and all the things that then can erode the trust in the client relationship. Brett, you know a lot about AI and how that is factoring in, and I would imagine that's a part of some of this, just being more, maybe not even using AI, but just being more efficient. Could you talk a little bit about that and how it's shaping AI and making this much more possible for the independent professional who wants to achieve high revenues and high profits and have a life too, not just be grinding it out all the time?
Yeah, that's what we all want. I don't know, expert might be a relative term. Very interested in where AI is going in the solo businesses. And yeah, I think there's, I've kind of seen three different paths. One, as individuals, I don't know about Pia and Taylor, using it in my everyday work, right? As a advisor / sounding board, help me automate some things, clean up, content, all those good things. But I think there's a second angle, and I work a lot with Gen X escaping corporate. And the one opportunity I think with AI is everybody thinks it's going to be automated, it's going to be super smart. It still needs the insights, right? So if you know somebody that knows AI really well, but has no business insights, and they try to work with the client, it's not going to work, right? You're going to fail quicker. You're going to get to the wrong answer quicker, whatever it is. So that's why I think there's a solo opportunity to partner with folks. If you don't want to learn AI yourself, to go help small businesses solve their problems, right? You lend your expertise, the AI guru comes in and basically can help execute against those visions. So I tend to be super wordy within my content. So it's been one of the biggest savers of running it through a couple of these AI assistants to help me streamline what I'm doing. So yeah, I think I don't know where it's exactly going, and I don't think you actually have to program it, but having the understanding of it and where the opportunities within the small business space, again, back to the point with, Taylor talking about folks need this expertise on a fractional basis. That's what they're hiring these folks for. So, and if you can build some automation, again, one of the things I think we're seeing, at least I'm starting to preach a lot, is you talked about the $53 million solo businesses. Why not take that same model and apply it against a $2 million business or a $5 million business, right? To start to automate some of those processes. And I'm talking as a consultant or a fractional, not as a small business owner that's going down that path. So I think there is a lot of opportunity just to stay on top. And it feels like we're late into the game, but we're really early in this process right now.
It's so fascinating, and it's really such a game changer. I found in my own business, I don't use AI for writing at all because I think there are a lot of ethical issues in my field because I'm a journalist. I don't even want to go there, but I use it for notes. Like I'll use Fathom for Zoom calls, and I have really great quality notes. And sometimes I'll use Microsoft Dictate if I'm not in a Zoom call, or I'll feed my sloppy notes through ChatGPT and say, don't change the wording, but get rid of all the errant spacing and typos. That alone has allowed me to deliver when I'm ghostwriting a book. I went from 12 months to 4 to 5 months, which is a game changer because then I can do many more books in a year. And I would imagine you're seeing similar things where just even one or two things that you do more efficiently can completely transform your whole practice in terms of revenue and profits, and as you said, quality too. Sometimes you feed it through and you're like, wow, I don't know how I had so many typos in that thing, but it catches so many things. So Taylor, what kind of skills are people looking for with the fractional executives? Are they looking for AI? Are they looking for other skills? You have your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah, I think, so like I said earlier, I don't think it's any one specific or a few specific function areas, right? I think it's a really, really broad set of function areas that can be fractionalized. So given that context, I think maybe the highest value traits that I think hirers are looking for when they're looking for fractional leaders. The thing that screams at me most important is having deep expertise in a specific thing. Whatever that thing can be so many different things, but having being able to say and show that you've been there, done that several times over in the exact same industry that the potential client is working in, and you can come in and do it again, that's like the exact thing that hires want to hear, and is what I think sets up for the most successful fractional relationships. I think like I'm hearing a lot of wanting fractional leaders to also be capable of using their hands, not just giving advice. Which I mean, maybe this is specific to tech primarily. I work with a lot of like early stage and growth stage tech startup founders, but it's a lot of like, I want someone who can come in, set the strategy, but is also capable of getting their hands dirty. I think that's part of like the tech ethos. So that definitely stands out to me as well. Maybe the third thing that stands out in terms of like super high value traits is just, and it's like kind of a necessity for fractional work, is the maturity to manage and juggle client relationships. Pia was mentioning earlier how hard it can be to have to be working with multiple clients at once, and it's absolutely true. And so it does take a certain kind of person to be able to context switch effectively, manage those client relationships, and also understand that when you're doing fractional work, you are now the product in a way, and what you're selling and delivering your expert services. And that's different from what most people have experience with when they're working like a full-time corporate job. So yeah, those feel like to me like at least some of the top skill sets or traits that hirers are looking for in fractional world.
Well, you've opened up kind of a Pandora's box here in terms of communication and marketing. Pia is the author of Badass Your Brand, and we are our own brands as professionals selling our services. How do you communicate that you have that unique expertise that they need and sell your services in a way that isn't salesy or uncomfortable? Because I think this crowd, we're practitioners. We love to do the actual work. I found in many programs I've done, when you talk about sales, people use the word icky for some reason. Icky is always the most common word. They hate selling their services, but you can also be consultative and helpful. So Pia, when you're telling people about a different way to work with you, how do they communicate what the program is when hiring you?
Yeah, I mean, I am a former icky sales feeling person myself. So, I mean, I developed my sales process that I teach creatives specifically because every creative I've ever met thinks that sales is icky and doesn't want to do it. And I can totally relate. And I built this process because of my own distaste for the selling process. But I think, and then, everybody around me laughs because they say, "You're such a great salesperson, Pia. How can you say that?" And I say, well, that's because it's what we think of as sales being icky is actually trying to convince someone that they should get something that they don't really want or need. That's what feels icky. What makes you a great salesperson that doesn't feel icky at all is trying to figure out, like, are you in pain? Do you have a headache? Because I have Advil if you do. And if you don't have a headache, I don't have Advil for you. I would never recommend that you take Advil if you don't feel pain. So it's the organic, honest, genuine curiosity of how, like, what's going on? How can I help you? And are there actual issues? Like I was just having a conversation yesterday with somebody who said that they spoke to someone who said, "I want a new website." And she said, "Why?" And they said, "Because mine's old and I did it myself." And when people say that to me, when they're looking for us to hire us, I say that's a terrible reason. Like, that's not a reason. I'm not going to do it for you if that's the reason you want a new website. Why do you want a new website? And let's dig down. And if it's because, well, my business isn't doing well because I'm not getting clients, I'm not getting the right clients, I'm not commanding the right price points. Okay, well, now there's an issue that we can actually solve. But until we uncover what the problem is, I can't help you. And so all of this is to say, I find it's a lot easier to have a conversation when you're just curious, trying to see if someone actually has a problem you can solve. And then what I teach is, if you identify that problem, instead of saying, okay, well, I'm going to go think about this and write you a proposal and come up with this whole plan for you for free, how about instead you pay me a kind of no-brainer amount of money to engage me for a short time so I can understand deeper what's going on and give you a really thoughtful, valuable also because you paid for it, so you'll value it, plan for how to tackle this thing. And I have found, I call it a lead product. I have found that when people pay you a small amount of money and you can then actually go down the rabbit hole of figuring out what their problem is and clarify it for them, well, then the sale is a no-brainer, because now you've built an incredible amount of authority and trust with the person that you've been speaking with, so that when you get to the end of this plan and you say, I could do the whole thing for you for $40,000, all of a sudden it feels like, you can solve this for me? I'm done, very easy. So that's how I've kind of bypassed the Icky sales process.
Oh my goodness, that alone, right, could make somebody another couple of $100,000 this year, just applying that in terms of being a gateway to other business. What do you call this? Is it a consultation? Just for someone who I want to give people actionable things to leave
Yeah.
with. They can do this week. Someone calls in and they're like, this happens to me with books. People say, oh, everyone in my office says I should write a book. And I'll say, do you want to write a book? Why do you want to write a book? But this is true for almost anything you sell. Like, what are they actually trying to buy from you? What result? So how do you go from them telling you what they want to selling them some type of engagement with you?
Well, I generally advise that we don't call it a strategy or an audit. That's the two things people always want to call it. But I find most clients don't understand strategy and they don't want to buy problems. They want to buy solutions. So I suggest you brand it. I call it a lead product, but that's what it's called. My lead product is called a brand shrink. So, like, I'm going to head shrink your brand. But I kind of recommend you give it a name that is branded for you, and you describe it after you've figured out what their actual problem is as like the next step to solving it. It's not going to solve the whole thing, but okay, now that we've gotten really clear on the problems you have, well, the next step is that we're going to do a deep dive for a couple of hours. I'm going to ask you a lot more questions, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you should do to solve that problem. It's called a brand shrink. It's X $100. If you connect this engagement, and I suggest making it a no-brainer price, if you connect this engagement directly to the problems that they have, it should be a pretty easy guess.
So that piggybacks on what Taylor said. So now, Brett, I'm going to hit you up. We're going to up the ante here a little bit. You've worked with a lot of Gen X professionals who are exploring different solo work options. How can they think creatively about different revenue streams and leverage their expertise across multiple channels? Like, as they do this brand shrinking and now they know what the client wants, how do they package what they know in a way that will be useful to the client and valuable?
Yeah, I'm going to actually piggyback off of Pia, because that is the one thing, is focus on the client problem, right? The one thing you learn in corporate and even in consulting, it's all about features and benefits. And, you work with consulting firms, they want to show you, hey, we can do these 15 things. The client doesn't care, right? Either you're going to save them time, you're going to make them money, or you're going to save them money, right? Those are usually the three problems that they're having, and your area of expertise is somehow going to help them fix it, right? Whether it's sales, marketing, leadership, whatever it is. And I found that if you can go into these conversations, do the discovery session, or just have a conversation, understand where their problem is, and you, with the subject matter expertise, doing this for, in my case with Gen X, 20 to 30 years, you know how you can solve that problem. And rather than trying to put a wrapper on it or stick it into, something that we did in corporate, there's different ways to do it, right? You don't want to do 100 different variations. And I love Pia's idea of the intensive as it. But if you're talking to a business owner, they've got some sales challenges, right? Maybe it starts with, 2 or 3 hours a month, just as a sounding board, helping them think through the process, or what do they really want with their vision, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, where you become a fractional leader within their business. So where I've seen people struggle is when they take one path, and I'm only going to do fractional, which I'm not opposed to. I think if that's what you want to do, that should be the path you go. It's going to be harder, because you got to find that business is ready for it. They've got the problem, and they understand the value of what a fractional leader can do. If you're a little bit more open to it, and again, back to what Pia said about solving the problem, it's just going to take you a different effort level to help them solve that problem. And then the same thing is you just stack, right? So, even if you again, you can add Pia assessment of the words that clients don't like assessments either. So it's part of it. But if you do something to get to get the engagement kicked off, maybe it's a 30-day. I love the idea of a branded solution. I always like to leave people out, right? So even though you can do the whole thing that's going to take 9 months, build it into phases. That way they get more comfortable with you, you get more comfortable with them, and then it just becomes a progression. And I think that's the way, because again, when you think about monetization within these businesses, just through my own personal journey over 5 years, I think now it's up to 9 different ways, right? Anything from coaching. I started as a solo consultant. That really wasn't my thing. Moved into fractional, then started finding some advisory. So there's multiple ways to do it, but the center of it always comes back is that problem that you're solving for the client. And if you can get creative and then also start to figure out where you want to spend your time, if you want to do the solo consulting that's 2 to 3 months at a time, the opportunity's out there. And there's others that just want to have, a few clients where they're working 5 to 10 hours per month on clients. So again, I think you can't go wrong if you start with the problem, and that helps solve the sales question too, because, hey, I can solve this and this is what the cost is to solve the problem, right? If you want to do it, great. If not, it's okay. But it takes the ick out of it because you really are just a problem solver, and there's a fee to be able to do that.
I love that. And it's totally honest too. You're not having to push something that somebody really doesn't need. You're coming in with what you truly recommend. So I think that's what gives people confidence in sales. Okay, so Taylor, Blake has a question for you. Based on the comments you made related to the most common types of roles that are working in the fractional approach, do you have thoughts for someone wanting to work in that fashion but doesn't specifically fit those categories? I think there's a market for fractional project management office leadership, but I feel like I'm a little greenfield in the efforts. Does it make more sense for me to stretch for fractional COO or CTO opportunities and then expand as fractional continues to grow, or maybe is more widely understood? That's a really good question. As we think creatively, what would you recommend based on what you're seeing in the marketplace?
It's one of the most common questions I get from new or incoming, fractional leaders is like, I do XYZ or my specialty is XYZ. I don't see any of those yet on, the Fractional Jobs job board, or they don't fit into the CFO, CMO, CTO mold. Like, does that mean that I can't do fractional work? I think unequivocally the answer is no. I have seen and met so many different fractional leaders that have all kinds of unique and cool and interesting niches. It's actually one of the most fun parts of my job is learning, like, oh my God, you do XYZ fractionally? Like, it's amazing. But in order to do it successfully though, I think at least today in the fractional world, it really comes down to figuring out how to leverage your network in a way to generate those potential clients and those leads for you. And so I think the question was about project management specifically. That's a broad, so I'm not sure what industry we're talking about here, but I think it starts with working your like close network and like bouncing and iterating on like the pitch and the kinds of problems you want to be solving with them, and gradually expanding conversations with your network from there until you're honing in on like, okay, now I'm seeing that, like, because at the end of the day, you're trying to find quote unquote product market fit, right? And so you're trying to find like where you fit into this marketplace, given your skills and given what the rest of, the higher side of the market, is demanding. So it takes work. It takes a lot of networking and a lot of iteration, but it is absolutely possible. I would be shocked if I encountered a function area that it cannot be fractionalized, in my opinion. But it does take some hustle, especially on the networking front, to make it happen.
That's very helpful. And I think a lot of times people want to know the specifics of what you're going to do more than what it's called. In my own experience, like sometimes I say I'm a ghostwriter and they're curious about does that mean I write every single word in the book? No, it's more of a collaborative editor. Sometimes I'm writing it, sometimes they're writing it, sometimes I'm editing. And so if you explain that, then they understand, with other things that people do, I think they just want to make sure they're hiring the right skill set. Pia, there's a question here that's really good about pipeline, and from Kristen. How do you handle your pipeline planning for the year when you're doing short-term projects? How do you keep it from becoming a panic sprint to line up the next client in the weeks between or during the contracts? I know you take vacations in between, but still you need
Long
the work
ones.
lined up.
This is kind of a multi-part answer, so I'll try to keep it brief. A couple of things. First, we zoom out and we approach our year with annual thinking as opposed to monthly thinking. I think a lot of people go into their own business still with an employee mindset of same amount of money every month. To me, that's a job. So what I'm looking for is, if I need $30,000 a month, I'm really looking to make $360,000 in a year, not $30,000 a month. $30,000 a month means I'm working at the same clip every month, and I don't want to do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is making sure that your offers are profitable enough to support that. I have kind of landed on this theory that all of your revenue must be generated working with clients less than 50% of your time, so that you have 50% of your time available to build your business and live your life. So, there's some math involved, but it's just math. There's hours, there's prices, there's amount of money that you need to live, to pay for your business, pay for your taxes. You can throw them all in a calculator and figure out exactly what you need to charge for it to be profitable. So then once we know that we're charging at a profitable rate where we only need to be working at the max half of our time with clients, now we're actually spending that other 50% of our time, probably all of it in the beginning and then less and less of it as you go forward, building authority, creating content, creating the systems that will continually bring your clients in. And then the way that we do the intensives is we book clients consecutively instead of concurrently. So I'm gonna book a client in on these dates, and then the next client I have to book, I would book them in 3 weeks later, and I'll have those 2 weeks in between, let's say, knowing that I have that next client coming. So I've done, like, 1 year we did 5 weeks in a row. We did a client every single week. We banked $100,000, and then we went to Europe for 3 months, and we didn't even tell anybody because we had no ongoing clients, and we were booking clients for when we came back. So it's just a completely shifted mentality of how your cash flow works. But if you have a lot of time and you're investing that time in building your pipeline, then you don't really have to worry about stressing about when the next client is coming, because you're kind of looking at a bigger picture.
I see all kinds of emojis flying. People like this idea, Pia. One question that was popping into my mind is people are often impatient and they want it done yesterday. So how do you get them to be patient and wait for you for 3 weeks when they're a hard-charging CEO who wants it done tomorrow?
Totally. Well, I tell them anyone else you hire, this won't be done for months. So you can not worry about this for a month and a half, and then we'll do it, and it will be finished at 6 p.m. on the date, on the second date of the intensive. So there's a hard stop. And we're speaking about creative services here. Nobody is able to guarantee a project is finalized in creative services unless you're doing this intensive model. So I find that gets a nice little laugh, and then they're like, oh, that sounds even better. Great.
That is super helpful. I mean, there's so many wisdom bombs in this talk that I think people can really act on that will help them make money. So I hope when you leave this, you really think about this. And obviously all of these people have published material on what they've done. Read their work and find out the details, because these will transform your life. A lot of people are struggling and hustling. I hear from them all the time through LinkedIn and other platforms that they don't have enough work, or they're not profitable, or they're having to shoehorn in all kinds of other things. This is a way to take control of your time. Speaking of creatives, I have a question for you, Brett, from Amina. What model would you recommend for someone transitioning from creative services, design work, to creative strategy, where they're not producing physical assets, fractional, intensives, et cetera? What are you seeing when you're working with the escapees that you help?
Maybe I'll take it a little broader, right? Creative, I think, is one of those areas. And even when the question Taylor had about, project management as a fractional, and I think that's one of the mistakes I made when I first started, was it had to be the exact what we were doing. Corporate, you had chief revenue officer, chief marketing officer. And I found one of the interesting changes or evolutions, I guess, would be, project managers hear from all the time. Well, this just doesn't translate. Small businesses aren't hiring project managers. They may not be hiring project managers, but where they're struggling is how to prioritize and manage projects and priorities within their business, right? So if you can reframe that and say, hey, Miss CEO, Mr. CEO, I can come in and help you take the 3 or 4 things you're trying to do, help you prioritize and then manage those products. So it may not be called projects. It may not be called project management, but it is a major problem within organizations. And I think that translates to just about any leadership. Another one I had recently was the CRM, somebody that's been doing CRM for 20 years. And they're like, well, small businesses. I'm like, anywhere a small business needs leadership help where they don't have a capability in-house, they will look to a fractional to come in and help them build that out. And then it's a little bit different definition of maybe fractional, but I want people to see the opportunities. I think too often it's, well, if I'm not in marketing, I'm not in creative, I'm not in sales, then does this translate? If you're solving for a problem in a big business, the small businesses have the same problem. They may just call it something different, and that just circles back. So I'm not sure I actually answered that question, but I think it goes back to what we were talking about where, these business owners and CEOs are looking for, right, know the strategy, can do the tactics, but you're also willing to get your hands dirty in the short term because they don't have those resources. And that's where you can add a lot of value. So even looking at the question on, creative versus the execution, it's the same thing. They need help in all areas, and it's you helping develop what that plan looks like.
This is great advice. Taylor, you look like you're about to say something.
I just wanted to add maybe to help also round this all out is there's one of the, I think, amazing things about quote unquote solopreneurship is the ability to choose your own path. And so I think myself and Brett and Pia are presenting different ways of choosing your own path. I speak, of course, from the fractional perspective specifically. It's not the only solution though, and there are many ways to approach solopreneurship, especially when you're starting out. I would highly encourage you to try different models for yourself and see what works and what resonates for you, because it's a very personal experience. Doing fractional work, I think, is an incredible opportunity for certain kinds of people. I think it's terrible for others. And I think that I would imagine Pia would say the same thing about the type of work that she advocates for. And Brett, I see quite a wide spectrum as well. I'm sure he would say the same thing. So choose your own adventure. I think that's one of the fun things about this time for all of us.
I love this. We're getting towards the end. If we could put the handout and the giveaways in the chat, that would be great. I'd like to ask each of you, if the attendees were to do one thing this week that would greatly increase their revenues and their happiness overall in their life, what can they take as an action step, as a parting piece of advice? Pia, do you want to start? You're smiling, so I think you have it.
I'm laughing because there's a million things. I guess on the topic that we discussed, think about how you can get paid for that initial engagement, whatever price point, because it completely changes the relationship and the trust that you build.
I love that, because we all give that away, right? I sometimes do 2 education calls for a sale, and I never even thought of charging for that. So that's one thing right there. Probably someone could make tens of thousands of dollars over the course of a year, depending on what your pipeline of potential business is. That's a great piece of advice. Brett, what about you?
Yeah, I think the biggest one I see people is don't overthink it, right? We tend to overanalyze and want to make the perfect pitch and the perfect client. Is just get out and do, right? Have the conversations with people and experiment, right? Unlike in corporate where you get penalized or punished for making bad decisions or taking risks. Here, if you work with one client and it just doesn't work out the way you want, or you didn't charge enough, it's okay. There's another client around the corner that you're going to be able to work with. And I think getting comfortable with it's not going to be perfect. And again, that's, one of the people I worked with in consulting for a while, he always told me, done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. And I'm really trying to live that now, is just get out, have the conversations, and versus trying to make it perfect. It'll just accelerate things as you go through the process versus sitting and waiting.
That's a great piece of advice, because each time you make those mistakes of underpricing or picking the wrong client or whatever, it makes you such a better entrepreneur the next time. Taylor, you were talking a few times about, being willing to roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, jump in. Is there something people can do to convey that, or to offer more services that are hands-on that will help them with adding to their repertoire, or getting more revenue from the engagements they already have?
I think it's an interesting question. Maybe to try and give a specific answer, I was recently chatting with a fractional CTO just last week who very, very storied career, like engineering leadership at Uber and other top companies. And I was asking him if he's still hands-on in his fractional work. And he referenced the fact that he's been leveraging AI recently, and I'll mention the tools in a second, and has been writing more code than he has in the last 10 years. And I thought that was a really interesting insight. And maybe the application here is, if you are particularly more senior in your career and perhaps less interested in doing some of the grunt work and the nitty-gritty work that you've done, in the past, I think that they're increasingly so, and this is not the case for every professional field, but at least some of them, there are tools now that are becoming available that will help you do the hands-on work without doing the hands-on work that you think of when you think of that kind of work. Like,
Oh yeah, like low code and no code.
That's certainly
tools.
A great example.
Oh my God.
But then even to take the engineering example, like in the proper coding world, like if you're a former engineer that hasn't written code in a while, like you can now start writing code again, and you can feel like you're Superman or Superwoman. And I think it's a really interesting time, that we're operating in, and might allow you to be more hands-on without the negatives that we all know that come with like being in the weeds in that way.
So great parting advice. Candace needs to run the giveaway, so I'm going to thank you all for these great practical tips. And obviously, these folks are worth following on social media. They have so many great ideas. Taylor, I could do a whole show on this. Here's the drawing for my book, Tiny Business, Big
Nice.
Money, the sequel to the $1 Million One-Person Business. We'll have 10 winners who in the U.S. who will receive the book.
Wow.
Nice.
That's a cool little graphic.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that the lettuce people are collecting everybody's info. If there's anything you need submitted, please let us know. So we have Katiana, Kimberly, Mark, Carolyn, Benjamin, Stephen, Brittany, Samantha, Stephanie, and S have won. Congrats to all. Sorry, all I could see was that little wheel there. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming and investing in yourself and your professional growth. We're a community and we all learn from each other. There's no business school course on this. There's no textbook, and events like this bring us all together. And I just want to thank the Solo Summit team for bringing us together with these cutting edge experts so that we can all grow our businesses collectively and share our know-how. So thank you all for coming. Thanks for all the emojis for our panelists. And I'll hand it back over to Candace.
Thanks, Elaine, and thanks everyone for joining. It's time to head to our last session, the keynote. I'm going to end this session. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.